Hello and welcome to Cricket8 Podcast. I'm Megha and joining me here is not Lord Byron but Rob Barron. There is a little bit of context to it now that the salutations have been exchanged. Hello, Rob. Do
Hello.
tell us about that context that
Yeah,
we were
we've
discussing ahead of the live.
Megha and I have spent the last hour and a half talking exclusively about Lord Byron. And I'm afraid you've all missed it, but we're going to do a series of podcasts on old poets and romantic poetry. That's something that you've all got to look forward to. We're going to bring one of those out every day for an hour. A bit of romantic poetry. Who are the other people we were gonna do?
William Wordsworth?
Yeah, yeah, and a bit of Samuel Beckett's gonna get involved at some
Yeah.
stage.
And Theatre of Absurd.
Yeah, and all my
Before we
favourites.
really chase people away. By the way, Samuel Beckett played first class cricket as well. What were his numbers like? Google and let us know. Meanwhile, on to the topic Indian cricket. And just a while back, the last time we met virtually, Rob, we were discussing about what ails Sri Lankan cricket. Apparently, they made notes of the points that you mentioned, and it all seems hunky dory, albeit in the two games two ODI games that we got to see in the previous week. So there was a tie, and then England, or rather Sri Lanka, managing to beat India. Now, very similar to what happened in T20Is with Sri Lanka, the lower middle order not stepping up, but the responsibility probably was on the top order. Before we head and discuss about the spin aspect of it, your thoughts, initial thoughts on the two games.
Well, firstly, you looked at it and thought 2 days before the first ODI, it's like Sri Lanka basically said, we don't have any fast bowlers now. That's it.
Yeah.
They're all injured. We don't have anyone. And the ones we called up, they got injured as well. And everybody thought, well, right, it's just a series that India are going to steamroll over Sri Lanka and then we'll forget about it. And then the pitches were quite spinny. And even though they didn't pick Hasaranga for one of them, or Hasaranga couldn't play for one of them,
Yeah.
they've just span India to hell. And basically, we talk about the fragile middle order that Sri Lanka have had, and it's India's middle order that have been showing them up. Like Axar's tried to dig them out of trouble. Um, but yeah, two brilliant ODIs. I mean, I'm thoroughly convinced that ODI is the best format in cricket. It just is. And they've been really absorbing watches, and those kind of 230 on tricky pitches, those kind of scores
Yeah.
are really fun. And Rohit has been doing the exact right thing, and so has Gill. And you come out and you try and smoke it and not leave anyone too much to do afterwards. And they've all messed it up. And it's been, I mean, how that first one was the first one the tie? Yeah, how the first one was a
Yeah.
tie, I'll never know. They all did lunatic stuff at the end of that game. Jubei being very silly and not knowing how to keep strike and all that sort of stuff. That was really funny. How in depth do you want me to go on that first one? That was really fun.
As much as you want to elaborate on that.
So I think like Jubei kind of had the game completely in the bag, didn't he? They needed 5 from 18 balls is what they needed with Jubei in and 2 wickets left. And he hit a 4 and tied the scores. And he just thought, yeah, that's fine. But prior to that, he could not understand what he was meant to do. So when you've got Siraj and Arshdeep as the two guys with you, you have to score the runs. You can't leave it to them to make correct decisions when it comes to batting. And Jubei just did everything wrong. And there was a bit where he took the single on the first ball of the over and let Siraj face 5 balls. And then they took the single off the last ball of the same over so that Siraj could keep the strike. And I was just screaming at the telly once again, going, what on earth are you doing? You have to score these runs. And then he smacked a 4 to tie the scores, didn't he, Jubei? And he was like, right, I've done it. Job done. It doesn't matter if I get out now because we've got 2 wickets in hand and they only need to get 1 run. I'm just going to have a ridiculous non-shot to a ball that was hitting the stumps. And the umpiring was also really, really funny. And Joel Wilson was just having a Joel Wilson day of kind of, I mean, if it was a normal umpire, Sri Lanka would have won the game an hour before they did. But Joel was keeping India in it with some of his decisions. Didn't give Jubei, did he, when he was plum? Then the review, then Arshdeep came in. And how many minutes do we need to talk about Arshdeep's shot for? Because at least Siraj had been in for 10 minutes. And he had 2 balls to see out of the over, and it's only Asalanka bowling. It's not Hasaranga. It's not Patharana. It's not someone, spinning it round corners. And he just had to at least have a look for a ball or two. They had, 14 balls to score a run? and he just did the absolute. Why did he do that? Massive swing, cleaned up, LBW, really funny. And then there's no super over in ODI in this particular series. Who decides that? Like, why is there super over sometimes and not other times? There should always be one because it's fun.
Indeed. But you talked about Sri Lankan pace attack. Is it the curse of Sri Lankan selection? Because a fast bowler, once he makes it to the squad, he within a day or two gets injured, and it has been happening for the last few years now. So, is it something to do with Sri Lankan selection? Is there some curse attending it?
Well, I'm not qualified to talk about curses, but they've
You've been
not
talking
managed
about the
to.
theater of absurd.
When you've
So,
got somebody
as
like
far as it goes.
Patharana, sorry, when you've
Hmm.
got somebody like Patharana who is an extremely valuable commodity that Sri Lanka have found themselves in white ball cricket, then this is where the support staff and the fitness coaches and whoever else, physios and everybody, have to get the guy in cotton wool. And yes, he's going to go away and play a fair bit
Hmm.
of franchise cricket. But when you've got someone that good and he's only 21, you've got to try and keep him fit or strengthen him up. And if he's getting similar injuries over and over again, I think he's played 11 T20Is in the last 2 years for Sri Lanka, and that's not enough. They need him on the park kind of all the time. And we saw in the IPL where he came in the IPL for a bit and then went away and came back and went away again. He just wasn't properly fit. And if it takes them 3 months now to get him fit, or it takes them 6 months now to get him fit, and then you've got a fit Patharana for the next 10 years, do it. Stop trying to patch him up and make him play in the odd game when you need him, when he's kind of got all these niggles and slight injuries or whatever. So he's the big one. And then Thashara and everybody else are kind of lining up behind him at the physio's table. Like, who are we going to fix first? I don't know whether it is a curse or whether there is something that Sri Lanka need to look at
Exactly.
in the conditioning side of things and get these
Hmm.
guys fit, because they were they had a terrible T20 World Cup just gone, um, which was a real shame because I thought that bowling attack for those conditions was nearly
Exactly.
perfect. Afghanistan showed what you can do with a good bowling attack in those conditions. Um, and if you look at Sri Lanka, they can get a really good competitive team on the park because their third string bowling attack
Hmm.
is 1-0 up after 2 games against India in an
Yeah.
ODI series, and it's not sure there are players that aren't playing for India, but the ones that are bloody good. And it just shows you that India have a huge problem when one thing happens, and that is Bumrah doesn't play. That's it. It's as simple as that. If Bumrah doesn't play, they can't throw the ball to someone and just win the game. They have to look around, and it's like, who's going to get the? Because it's not a pacer. You can't. They what did they do in the T20 the other day? Rinku and Sky are bowling the last
Yeah.
2 overs because they don't
Hmm.
trust Siraj to close it out. So
Or was it them wanting to experiment with not much left anyway? Siraj anyway had bowled well for the 3 overs that he was handed the ball.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was an experiment thing, but if you're experimenting, are you ever going to throw the ball to Rinku or Sky in a World Cup? You're not, are you? You're just not going to do that.
Series in
Uh,
the bag that prompted.
Fair enough. I mean, I thought the last over had to go to a random spinner because they were chasing 6 or something, weren't they? And that's fine. That's when you try and up the volatility and you bowl a random person and hope that the mad stuff happens, which it did.
Hmm.
I'm okay with that. But yeah, my main
Connected
point
it.
there is it just seems that when Bumrah doesn't play, India are hugely vulnerable, and they are not going to defend stuff comprehensively. And I think, I mean, KL Rahul seems to have got a fair bit of hate from the stuff that I've been reading in the last few days. What do
Hmm.
you make of that, Megha, of his performance?
KL Rahul, he somehow
Yeah,
manages to attract a lot of jibe, a lot of criticism. Uh, we've seen that with some players, and it's pretty strange. But I have an explanation for it. In KL Rahul's case, there's ever more brickbats because he has so much potential, and we've seen what he can do. And he was touted as this extremely talented player, and he wasn't. he didn't straight away get to represent India. He had slogged it out in the domestic circuit for a number of years, was the highest run getter across some tournaments, and that's how he got his India cap. Before that, played for India A as well, did well there, and we've seen a fair bit of him in the IPL now as well. Probably the criticism is directed at him because people think that he has this enormous potential and he's not doing justice to it. And if you remember the early days of Rohit Sharma as a batter, the conversations were similar. He was labeled, I don't want to go into the labels, but some really rude remarks would be directed at him, some really rude tags would be attached to his name because he'd not last long. And you'd expect him to go on to score big because of his potential. He has such a great gift of timing, but he'd not be doing anything about it. And then he was dropped. He worked hard on himself, came back, and now obviously he's playing his 265th ODI. So I think it's more because you see that these people have a lot of potential in case of people who are talented. And when they do not realize their potential, you are ever more critical. Maybe for a limited player who's doing his best, and that best is a limited offering, you could still put up with it, but talent, that's the sort of criticism that talent can attract.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Like it, he got what 30 odd in the first one and looked fine, and scoring at a 70 strike rate on those pitches is absolutely fine when you're chasing 230.
I'd also add World Cup finals into this conversation, 2023 World Cup finals. And when you talk about his innings, do allude to that as well. Because the trolling also refers to it, also brings those stats forward.
Yeah, and I also think we've spoken about this before. Is the panning that he's got, the way he's changed his game in the IPL, and whether that was instructions and then
Yeah.
wasn't instructions, how he turned himself into an anchor, because we know how free scoring that guy can be. But I don't think it's his fault. And yes, he got a duck the other day. I don't think it's his fault that they didn't win either of those matches. They had both of those matches in the bag, and
But Rob,
um,
does he get criticized for the ducks or does he get criticized more when it's 30 or 50 deliveries or 70 or 100 deliveries?
yeah, he definitely gets the panning for not scoring quick enough, doesn't he? And I think when there are a lot of people that love Rishabh Pant for obvious reasons, and when he is keeping Pant out the side, that's when it all starts, doesn't it? I mean, I
Mm.
feel it's hard to feel sorry for a multi-millionaire cricketer, but I feel a bit sorry for the stick that KL gets because of how good he is. And it's not easy to come back in the middle order on those sort of pitches and suddenly go, right, oh yeah, I'll score 50 off 30 and just win the game, because there seems to be like he's almost set up to fail, or he's
Mm.
he's waiting to be shot at. So I don't know the guy, and I don't know that much about him, but he must be a pretty tough character to deal with the stuff that he's had to, and he clearly doesn't mind sticking up for himself when the owner's having a go at him or whatever. Um, let's see. I mean, maybe KL decides at some stage. What is he? 32. Maybe he
Mm.
decides at some stage. Right, I'm going to show you. I'm just going to come out and smoke everything. And the next IPL, he just tees off from ball one. But I don't know. Can he do that anymore? Can he go back to doing that now?
Uh, can he do that? We've seen glimpses of that in every season, and that's why evermore. The question, why doesn't he do that more often? But again, coming back to the ODI format, uh, at least last year, before he got injured and after he came back into the Indian side after the injury, after he'd recovered, he was batting in the middle order, and there was space enough in the middle order for KL Rahul because of the numbers that he had accumulated batting in that position. Dynamics have changed a bit. There are new names that are being thrown into, and they are in the conversation that have done well in whatever little opportunities that they've been given. So, probably now the conversation is him keeping out another specialist wicketkeeper. But at the start of the last year, it wasn't like KL Rahul was keeping out a wicket keeper. He had earned that slot for himself. He also took up the wicket keeping responsibility because he was a regular sans injury. So it made sense. And he provided that additional option to India, and they could accordingly decide whether they wanted an all rounder, whether they wanted a bowler or a batter, whatever. But is it fair to really say, and does he even now, in the present context as well, has he earned his middle order position based on what he has done in the past if he's not keeping the wickets?
Great question. I think I can see the argument for again. India are lucky. They've got probably 4 people that can fill that spot that would walk into most ODI sides. Um, I don't mind which way India go, really. Like we were saying before, they can blast it at the top. They can take their time and set the platform and have other guys blast it. But he's not the number 5 that comes in and smashes it anymore. So if you want one of those, you're better off having Pant. Um, I think, again, embarrassment of riches for India. Um, I mean, the point I do want to make is that KL Rahul is not a wicket keeper. So trying to turn him into one of those just so that he can justify his place in the side, that is something that is massively crept into T20 cricket, where you see all these people calling themselves wicket keepers that aren't any good at wicket keeping. They're just guys like Klassen's not a wicket keeper. I mean, he doesn't even wear pads, does he? He just sort of, he's like, well, I'll do it. And the thing with Klassen is, Klassen's so good at batting, he doesn't need to wicket keep. He doesn't need to justify his position
Yeah.
by adding another skill. Like, he's fine in the outfield. He can catch and he can throw, right? So that's good enough when you're that good at batting. Why does he sit there for 20 overs, crouching down with the pads on, making his back sore? It's just madness for these teams to make him do it. So there's loads of people now that think they have to become wicket keepers to make themselves more bankable on the franchise circuit. So we're now, and lots of teams have gone away from thinking they need a good wicket keeper, because we go on about how Indian pitches are spinny, but in the IPL they're not. They're generally really good decks, and we saw that 230 and 250 and 260 getting chased in the IPL, one down. It's gone away from that. So if you're playing in these conditions, where these first 2 ODIs have happened, you better have a decent wicket keeper, because the ball is beating the bat loads and it's spinning loads, and you have to stand up and you have to be really good at it. Because I mean, I've been watching Pooran in the last week in the 100 wicket keeping. I don't care what people tell me. He's not a wicket keeper, Pooran. Like, he's done it so many times, and he doesn't stand in the right place. He was like -12 for his keeping the other day, Pooran. And I think cricket has gone away from needing or thinking that it needs a wicket keeper. KL isn't one. I think Pant is closer to a wicket keeper than KL is. Whoever's just messaged in there saying Klassen is a great wicket keeper is trying to wind me up. Sorry, Sag. False. It's like saying I'm a great long distance runner or something. It's just farcical.
Or a great poet.
Well, my poetry's okay. My long distance running is
Klassen's
not.
wicket keeping is okay, at least. I mean,
It's
you'd at least call
okay.
him okay.
It's a guy that it's a decent fielder that has put the gloves on, is what he is. We've gone way away from good wicket keepers playing for every team, because teams are like, well, we'd much rather have a guy that can score an extra 20 strike rate with the bat, and I get that, and I'm fine with it. But sometimes when you're playing in tough wicket keeping conditions, England is one where it swings early. You want a keeper that can catch, because sometimes your only chance in white ball cricket on English decks is a good example, is that first 10, 12 balls where it does swing. And you've got to take those edges. You've got to get them 1 or 2 down. Otherwise, when the swing goes, it's easy. And anybody can keep in Australia standing 30 yards back to pace. Like me and you could do that. It's not
I
very
wouldn't try.
difficult. You should try. It'd be a great watch. But
Hilarious
anyone can keep like that. But when it's and on the franchise circuit, they're trying to, most of the places now, try and create roads because people want to see sixes and high scores. Yeah. It's boring, but when you see tougher pitches, you need a wicket keeper. I don't like it. It annoys me about cricket that we see all these people calling themselves wicket keepers that aren't them. There are about half a dozen on the circuit that are good at wicket keeping. That said, like, KL was fine in the field when he was a fielder, like, no problems. He wasn't one of the kind of old guard of Indian batsmen that didn't care about fielding. Like, KL's fine. Pant is a better, more natural wicket keeper, but he's always, the thing about Pant's keeping, he's really entertaining as a wicket keeper.
Yeah.
But quite often his legs end up above his head when they don't need to. And I like watching that, right? When he's diving to one side and he's sort of doing half a cartwheel, and he is pretty athletic and stuff. But quite often he drops the ball when he's clowning around. I think he needs to work harder at his wicket keeping, because if Pant was a really good wicket keeper, standing up and standing back, then there wouldn't be a conversation, because you would have to pick Pant, because there's not enough between the batting of Pant and KL to have any doubt about it if Pant was brilliant at wicket keeping. But I think they've identified that KL and Pant, there's not masses in it, which there probably should be. Like Pant should. I know Pant's had a dreadful time of it. You know, he's been out for
Yeah.
18 months with a horrific injury, so you can't be too harsh on the guy. But if I was Pant and I wanted to play for India, I'd be practicing that wicket keeping all the time because we know how skillful he is with the batting and how explosive he can be. So yeah, turn himself into a Dhoni type wicket keeper who's as good a guy standing up to the stumps as I've ever seen in my life. If he became one of those, I mean, he would just play all the time, all formats. He'd just have to, wouldn't he?
When Pant started out in international cricket, he wasn't that great behind the wickets. It was the X factor as a batter that was being talked about. In KL's case, he hadn't been keeping regularly in domestic cricket or in the IPL just because there was a vacancy in the Indian team and he also wanted to consolidate his position in the team. He stepped up. So, are we judging the two uh, with different parameters in place? Because in KL's case, what do you see? How would your assessment be of the progress that he has made? In the 50 overs World Cup, he was the wicket keeper. The wickets were of all sorts. He did fairly well. Rishabh Pant, huge body of work behind him, just in terms of numbers. But how would you compare the two of those and how much progress they've made in whatever amount of international cricket that they've featured in as wicket keepers? And what potential do you see for them to turn into better wicket keepers?
I don't see KL suddenly becoming a great wicketkeeper at 32 years old. I think Pant's ceiling is much higher when it comes to wicket keeping. I think KL sort of does it reluctantly, and why he keeps sometimes in the IPL is beyond me. When they've got three proper wicket or three actual wicket keepers in the team, and you see KL with the gloves and anything, what's happening here? Like, why on earth is he the keeper when you've got De Kock that can do it? De Kock's fine. He's an actual wicket keeper, De Kock, and Pooran is there, I suppose. Pooran is an unbelievable fielder and shouldn't be wicket keeping when there's anyone else that can do it. Pant is like a precocious talent, and if you're when you like, I think we discussed this last time or the time before. When you've got a batting order that's unbelievable, like India, you can afford to gamble a bit with your number 5 or 6, and you can go Pant. You might come off 1 in 8, but when you do, it's 60 off 24, and you've obliterated. You know, you've turned 300 into 350, or you've chased from nowhere. Whereas KL used to be the guy that could do everything, and he hasn't shown that magic that we used to associate with him back in the day. And I love KL Rahul. I really like his batting. I like watching him all formats. I think he's a gun. But if he's not going to do that and come out smacking, where this India team is going to need their 5 or 6 or that wicketkeeper guy to be a more often than not the bloke that comes in and hammers it. Like Gilchrist was allowed to be Gilchrist because in Test particularly, he was always coming in with like whatever it was, 500 for 5. You're like, oh, okay. What type of batting do I need to do today? It was the same every time. He just needed to gun it. And then he then turned himself into one of the best ODI openers on the circuit because he had so much practice at smacking it everywhere. I think long term, Pant is more likely to be that guy, isn't he, than KL is. You could argue there's a place for both of them, but then who are you going to leave out? And India do need to think about what they do when Rohit isn't there anymore in the ODIs. I don't know how long that's going to be because Rohit has been a total hero in ODI cricket almost since he started. Like I think there's he's definitely in the all-time world 11, Rohit Sharma. And we all know how good Kohli is at chasing. I don't know how many years Kohli's got left of ODIs. I'm not sure whether he won another crack at a World Cup. What do you think? Do you think we see one more World Cup for those two? Or do you think, considering that they won it, they definitely will stay retired and won't come back?
They'd certainly want to continue because how the hunger, how to suppress that, how to rather not, as in, I don't think they'd want to retire. Now, what shape the circumstances take, what options India have at their disposal, after the end of the Champions Trophy, that would be a big determinant, because as far as those individuals are concerned, they are fierce fighters. And for sports persons at that level, it's not easy for them to reconcile that their time is up, even when it is up. Here we are still talking about a gray area, and they have been contributing. Virat Kohli with his fitness, we always talk about how he can lengthen his career just because he's so fit, even at this age. In Rohit Sharma's case, the conversation is very different. He, despite not being one of the fittest cricketers around, is still managing to smack the ball and getting those quick fire starts. So it's an interesting question, one that I do not have a clear answer to. But at the end of the day, it would be about what other options India have, and whether these two want to continue or not, how they are as far as form is concerned, how their form is around the Champions Trophy, because Champions Trophy would have a huge say. What transpires in the Champions Trophy would have a huge say in how India goes ahead. Because after the Champions Trophy, it would just be 2 years for the next World Cup, and India would want to rebuild. So, would the rebuilding also include the experience of these two? It's a tricky call to take at the moment.
Just
By
on
the
that,
way, hmm,
professional sportsmen or sportswomen should never retire. Don't do it. The real world sucks compared to playing sport for a job. And so many
the
sports
grass is
people,
greener on the
yeah,
other
so
side.
many sports people think, well, I can just go into commentary. Like, going into commentaries are harder than going into bloody cricket nowadays. Like, they all want to do it. Or I'll just do this, I'll just do that. And you see, there's a couple of people, like, if you're English and you're Stuart Broad or Jimmy Anderson, you can probably do what you want now, and you've got enough
Hmm.
cash or whatever. But most people, when they stop playing sport, really miss it. And most people, when they get to, like, let's say they retire at 35 and they're 40 and they think, I could have probably done 3 or 4 more years. And I know Alistair Cook's sort of farming every morning, and, like, would you rather get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and milk cows, or just play 10 test matches every year or whatever it is? Like, think about it, guys. No one should ever retire from anything, and you should try and, I would be wringing the last ounce of my being of being a cricketer and just go, right, I'll drop down the league. Some of them do it, don't they? You just see them cropping up and they go, all right, I'll play in the Canada one, and if someone wants to pay me to play in Abu Dhabi, I'll play in one of them, and I'll do some T10s. Like, why
Hmm.
not? Because you're a hell of a long time retired. You're talking about, you're probably going to live another 40 or 50 years afterwards. Um, yeah, stop retiring, everybody. It's silly. Uh,
So, you mean international retirement, or retirement from professional cricket
yeah,
altogether?
I don't like international retirement anyway. I don't.
For
I think
example, Rakshit reminds us.
um, if you're, yeah, sorry, that's a good point, Rakshit. I saw that today. DK is going to play in the SA20, and why not? He's still good enough to play in a league like that. It's not the Premier League, is it? SA20. It wants to be one of the better ones, but why not? If you, what is he, 39? DK? He's not 40 yet.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll
why
cross
not?
check.
Why not play in one of those if you can get
Hmm.
some money to play cricket? Because he's a good commentator and he wears nice
Hmm.
shirts, and he's still good enough at whacking
39.
bad pace, as we see in the as we is he 39 yet? He's still good enough at whacking bad pace in the IPL, and you get some lovely decks in that SA20 when high altitude, the ball flies everywhere in the high veld or whatever. Why not do that rather than not do it? So as far as international retirement goes, there are a few people that kind of earn the right to go. Like, Jimmy Anderson didn't retire;
Hmm.
he was kicked out. But Stuart Broad definitely did retire,
Yeah, he did.
and that's kind of fair enough for Broad. He's got a young family and all that stuff. Again, don't have families if you're a professional athlete. Just wait. Just you can marry anyone you want. Just don't, like, spoil
Don't
all
listen
that
to
fun
him.
by
Professional athletes, don't listen to Rob.
yeah.
Not
Don't have
this part.
families until you're retired. It's madness, absolute lunacy. Um, yeah, you've got so much time for all that, and you can kind of be with anyone you want when you've retired. So why not just play cricket for a bit longer, or football, or tennis, or whatever? I don't get it. Anyway, yeah, international retirement. Some people, Shane Warne and McGrath, when they just hammered in England 5-0. That was kind of the end of their cycle. It was a long way away from anything else that they were
The
particularly
next
bothered
year.
about. I kind of understand that one where you just go, I've given everything I can and my body started to break down and I've been doing it for 20 years or whatever, fine. But most people that you go, right, I'm retiring from international sport now, you think, come on, man. Like, why? Like, I'm not particularly patriotic. I'm English, but if I was good enough to play anything for England, I keep playing until they told me I wasn't good enough or I'm not allowed to.
WG Grace, you'd be WG Grace playing forever.
Oh, yes, please. If you're able to go, uh, half the time when he wasn't out, he's just like, sorry, lads, I'm going to carry on batting, and who's going to tell me not to? Uh, yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. I know we've kind of gone off topic here, but everyone should stop retiring,
Totally.
and you shouldn't have a family until you shouldn't even have a wife or a husband until you have retired. It's crazy. Megha, you look
I'm
shocked. You look
baffled.
shocked about this.
Indeed. Indeed. I would want to know what your wife has to say about this because your profession as well requires a lot of commitment. Moving on, and WG Grace, a great character, but it's an interesting dilemma because as an international sports person, as a top class sports person, you have that hunger. It's that hunger that has propelled you through all your childhood, teen years, and that hunger never really comes to an end. But you got to reconcile and you got to also sense what is ahead of you and what is ahead lying ahead for the team. So you preempt, you don't want to tarnish your legacy, and it's a weird situation because if you're not doing well and you're seeing this gradual decline, one, do you acknowledge and understand and assess that decline like other people do? Because always we'd think differently from others when it comes to our performances, whatever field we choose. And secondly, uh, if there are options at the disposal of the team, we're talking about team sport. In tennis, you can go on forever. If you don't qualify, if you crash out in the first rounds, uh, there's not, I mean, it's up to you. It's to a great extent up to you. But in a team sport, if you want to represent your country, like in Anderson's case, there wasn't a replacement per se ready. Atkinson, we saw him do well, but only when he got that debut. Had he not made his debut, we could have still been contemplating the ifs and the buts. But because that decision was taken for Anderson by somebody else, he was asked to retire. So I think it's a weird situation because it's about how well you're able to reconcile. At what point are you able to reconcile? Because you would want to go on forever. Retiring on a high is not something that we see all the cricketers opt for in the subcontinent, at least, because they think there's more to them and they can contribute more to the team. And when the downhill, when the struggle with the form kicks in that case they think they can still redeem themselves, and all of that is very valid. It's very valid to feel all of that as a human. But again, like Rob says, never retire. You can retire from international cricket because it's not entirely in your hands, but continue playing the all the leagues that are mushrooming around the world. But also the fact that once they retire earlier, the scenario was once they hung their boots from international cricket, there was this huge void that they knew existed because all of a sudden everything was around their sport, everything was around cricket. But suddenly there was this huge void, and every day, right from getting up in the morning to what time they went to sleep, there was this huge void to fill. But in today's scenario, they still know that there are league opportunities and they can continue playing. And then, even if they've retired from the IPL, like in Dinesh Karthik's case, there is SA20 that he can opt for. So the dynamics have changed a bit, and then they can unretire as well if they fare well in the IPL, and there's a World Cup coming up, and the combination is such that there is a possibility for them to get a look in. They can unretire. So the dynamics have changed now, but yeah. Like we've discussed earlier, it's not a straightforward call. It never can be. And anyway, maybe somebody on the wrong side of 30s or having crossed 40s, it's also about the body, what signs the
Sure.
body is giving. In Mahendra Singh Dhoni's case, he underwent a surgery. And every year for the last 3, 4 years, there has been suspense around whether he'd continue or not. And then there are times when he says definitely not. There are other times when we have to wait for the off season to get over for us to get some clarity on it. But it's never easy.
Yeah, I think sometimes your country needs to help you out a bit when they can spot the decline. So some people, you should take life advice from me, whoever's messaging that in. Um, Sometimes you need your country to help you out a bit, and the coaches to go, listen, mate, we've noticed that you're kind of gone now. I think Aaron Finch is one where it was
Yeah.
actually quite sad to see him keep getting hammered LBW.
Mm.
And Australia could have easily got him out of that firing line quicker than they did. And there was a series where Shaheen was just getting him out LBW for 5 or 5 off 10 every game, or none off 4 or whatever. And from a betting point of view, that's great. I was just hammering unders and LBW every innings. But Australia could have easily got Finch, and that's when you mentioned about tarnishing legacies, that sort of thing can happen. But that's up to the coaching staff to go, listen, mate, let's give you one more big one. Who do you want to play against? Where do you want to play? Do you want MCG in full house against whoever? You can captain and bat wherever you want, and you can bowl the last over or something. Like, that's fine. But not give a guy another 6 months just because he's been really good for ages. Like, when you see someone who is performing badly, that's very different. That's where, if somebody doesn't want to retire, you kind of have to step in as a decent coach or a decent manager and go, listen, mate, like, you're not as good as the guy that is waiting, and so we're going to let him bat. And that's sport and tough. The other thing that you mentioned just before we wrap up is people that unretire. Now, that has to be banned. You're not allowed to do that. If you retire, stop it, because you create, like, the Stokes thing. Everybody knew that Stokes was going to play in the World Cup. Everyone knew when he said, I'm not playing ODIs anymore. Everybody knew that he was going to play in the next World Cup. And that is not fair on the people that have then play for 4 years, think they're in the team, and the week before Stokes decides he wants to play. Messes up the balance, messes up the team dynamics and the dressing room and all that, because at least one guy is completely pissed off then that Stokes has said, I want to play. And AB de Villiers tried to do the same thing for South Africa. Now,
Indeed.
what AB could have done 2 World Cups ago is he could have said,
Absolutely. Is it just me that can't hear Rob at the moment? Maybe Rakshit can tell us. Is it just me, Rakshit, who can't hear Rob at the moment? There is this comment that has constantly been around. Yeah. Here I was. Thanks, Vignesh, for clarifying, because I was baffled whether it's my internet or is it Rob's. All right, then. So we can quickly take some comments. Vignesh says Dhoni won't retire in the IPL because CSK would not let him. Don't buy any rumors about him retiring. And it kind of makes sense considering the colossal figure that Mahendra Singh Dhoni is in the IPL. Saurabh Somani makes this point about this Cricket8 article, and actually I am aware of it. That's why I mentioned 265th ODI. Rohit, by the way, would be playing his 265th ODI, and 264, of course, is a much celebrated figure. Still, we have not had somebody toppling it. You're back, Rob. So,
am I?
closing
I don't know
thoughts.
where I went. Just on the AB thing. AB could have said, I'm going to play in the World Cup, but I'm not going to play any other cricket. And South Africa would have gone, that's fine. But what he decided to do was retire, and then 3 days before the World Cup saying, I'll play. And that is so selfish and so unfair on the guys that are all in. And unfortunately, South Africa, who would have been a way better team if AB was in it for that World Cup, had to say, really sorry, mate, but we've named our squad and we have to kick somebody out because you've decided 3 days before the tournament. Like, yes, this unretiring thing, pack it in. Like, you either retire or you don't. Because that's when egos just come in and go, well, I actually don't want to play in any ODIs other than the World Cup, so I'll just play in that. You need stronger management to stop this stuff. But I think now is a good time to wrap up, Megha. But if my for some reason the internet doesn't want me to talk about people unretiring.
Probably all the people complaining, they would have done something about it because they didn't want life advice from you. But trust me, Rob can dole out some good life advice as well. And you talked about strong management. We've got that as well in the back end, because Rakshit has constantly been reminding us that we are nearing the 40 minutes mark. We talked about everything but the topic that we put in the thumb. And probably we'd get back to that in some other episode. And Rob, we'd let you reconsider the strong opinions that you've just stated. All right, then. Bye bye. See you.
Good to see you, Megha. Bye, everyone.